Todd Blackledge joining us. So these games, we want them to live up to the hype. How much hype is surrounding this, and are both teams capable of living up to the hype here?
Well, I think for sure Ohio State is.
Okay.
I need to see it from Oregon. I think the hype and the energy and the atmosphere when the game kicks off is going to be unbelievable. Autzen Stadium is not the biggest place, but it is extremely loud. It will be an advantage. Ohio State has been kind of a slow starting team in the first quarter, in the first half, only 7 last week against Iowa. But when I look at them, I don't see any weaknesses on their team. And, Oregon, I think, is very, very talented. I think they're playing their best football right now. They got their offensive line figured out. Their defense is playing better. But they're going to have to play by far their best game of the season with the team they've got coming in.
Ohio State went out and spent some money this offseason.
Yeah, they did. They went all in, and it's so interesting because, and I know they would hate this comparison, but covering Michigan the last couple of years, and some of the guys that made the decision to come back because they wanted to pursue a championship. They hadn't beaten Ohio State in their career. They wanted to leave a better legacy as Michigan players, and they were able to do that. They were able to beat Ohio State, and they were able to win a national championship. And a lot of these guys, not only did they spend money in the transfer portal, but they had several guys who could have been high draft picks that decided to come back, and they've built around that. The addition from the portal and the guys who came back that could be first-round picks will be first-round picks after this year. And they've got great chemistry, great culture, and a very pinpointed vision. I mean, they are looking at winning the national championship or bust, and that's that's the pressure they put on themselves. But they've got the kind of team that could make that kind of run.
How many teams can afford 2 losses and still make the playoffs, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, we're new in this, right, with 12 teams. So it's totally new. I mean, we've got to kind of change our whole parameters. I don't think a lot of teams with 2 losses could, but again, you don't know how the whole season is going to play out, because we're gone from 4 teams where it was unheard of to think of a 2-loss team making it to now 12. So it's going to be different. But there's a lot, at the midway point, and it's cool because there's a lot of teams that are still very much in the college football playoff conversation. And even this game, in years past, the loser of this game, particularly now it's a conference game, was behind the 8 ball. And that's not going to be the case. I mean, this is going to be a great litmus test for both teams, a great measuring stick for both teams of where they go from here. But it doesn't rule them out of the college football playoff. It doesn't rule them out of playing for a Big Ten championship either.
We're a week out from Vandy upsetting Alabama.
Yeah.
And it still sounds strange to say that, but this is like a 1.5 losses, it feels like. Certain teams have a loss and other ones have it. This one's a little more costly. Perception-wise,
yeah,
it's a huge win, or, well, I should say a huge loss for Alabama. Can they afford 2 losses and be in the playoffs?
They still play in the SEC. They still have some big games left. They maybe could, but you're right. The perception of that is not good. And that's not to take anything away from Vanderbilt or the job that Clark Lee has done there. And, they've got the exciting cult hero quarterback now and Diego Pavia. But, especially coming off the heels of the game that was like this a couple weeks before, where they built up Georgia, Alabama, the game of the year. And it was a great game and an exciting game, and Alabama wins and goes to number 1. And then they turn around and lose to a team that they were heavily, heavily favored to beat. So perception of that is going to sting for a while.
NBC Sports' Todd Blackledge, he'll be on the call. It's Ohio State at Oregon, 7:30 Eastern on NBC and Peacock. Notre Dame's chances of making the playoffs?
Well, they don't have a lot of big games left on their schedule. The one team that they were, I think, counting on to be a marquee kind of game for them Florida State, who they host in a couple of weeks, can't get out of their own way, can't win a game. It seems like so that game's not going to help them. USC, they'll play them, but they don't know what USC will look like by the time that game comes around. So they just can't afford to lose a game. I mean, they've got to win everything out and hope that the things fall the way they can. I think if they win the rest of their games, they got a decent shot of it. Yeah.
What about, let's say, Army beats Notre Dame or Navy, neutral site? Could you see either one of the military academies sneaking into the playoffs?
Well, I think they're both in the conference too, so they could conceivably win a conference championship, and then there's the highest ranked non-Power Four conference champion is going to get in automatically. Now, right now, that looks like it's going to possibly be Boise State, who's a really good football team, has a guy who may win the Heisman Trophy, and Ashton Genty. So it'd be tough. I don't know that an Army or Navy would make it as an at-large. I think they would have to make it as a conference champion that's ranked higher than any of those other division champions.
So you quarterbacked the 1982 national champs at Penn State?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What do you remember about that?
Well, I remember a lot. I mean, I remember a couple big regular season games. One was at home against Nebraska, was a critical game. Both teams were in the top five, similar, to this kind of a regular season matchup with Ohio State and Oregon. We lost the game a couple weeks after we beat Nebraska. We lost at Alabama, and we're able to still kind of get in position. And, it was before there was the BCS or college football playoff. We were an independent. We weren't in a conference. And when we won the last weekend of the season against Pittsburgh, which was our arch rival, we moved to number 2, and Georgia was number 1 and undefeated SEC champ. And so we met them in the Sugar Bowl. So it was 1 versus 2, which, didn't always happen. They didn't arrange for that to happen. The SEC was committed to go to the Sugar Bowl, and we just happened to get there. And so it was 1 versus 2. And it was a great game in New Orleans.
Have fun. Should be awesome on Saturday night with the Oregon and Ohio State. Thank you, Todd.
Yeah, and I didn't like that last caller because, I'm, Ohio guy, and I'm sure all the Buckeye fans, we're pulling for the Guardians. We like cheering for the Guardians.
But
they're a fun team.
Did Ohio State recruit you?
Well, so they kind of did, but not necessarily as a quarterback. They had signed Art Schleister the year before, and he was like everything in the state of Ohio. And so they kind of talked to me about maybe being a tight end or a linebacker. And, I wanted to play quarterback. So I didn't want to go there. But I have great respect for Ohio State. I have a lot of friends that went there and played there and, love their school. So it's a great place.
Thank you, bud.
Okay, man.
That's Todd Blackledge, NBC Sports. Big Ten Saturday night, and they will have the game. It starts coverage 7:30 Eastern on NBC and Peacock.